Driverly.com, unlimited drama series.
The sound of Vanessa's heels clicking against our hardwood floor at 11:30 p.m. told me everything I needed to know. She was dressed to kill in that semi-sheer black number that cost more than most people's rent, and she sure as hell wasn't heading out to buy groceries. Going somewhere special? I asked from my spot on the couch, not bothering to look up for my beer. She paused at the mirror by our front door, adjusting her lipstick with the kind of precision that comes from years of practice. Meeting some friends for drinks. Friends. I let the word hang in the air like smoke. Would these be the kind of friends who appreciate expensive lingerie under designer dresses? Vanessa turned, and I caught that flash in her eyes. Part annoyance, part thrill. She loved this game we'd been playing for months now. This dance around the obvious truth that our marriage had become nothing more than a shared mortgage and mutual contempt. You're being paranoid again, Eddie. Am I? I stood up, walked over to where she stood preening. Because last week, when you were meeting friends, Mrs. Felton saw you getting into some guy's BMW outside the Marriott downtown. Her reflection smiled at me through the mirror. Cold. Calculated. Mrs. Felton needs to mind her own business. So do I, apparently. I moved closer, close enough to smell her perfume, the expensive stuff she only wore for special occasions. Tell me something, Nessa. When you're out there playing whatever game this is, do you ever think about the guy at home who's been busting his ass for 12 years to keep you in designer clothes and luxury cars? She turned to face me fully now, and there was something almost predatory in her expression. You want to know the truth, Eddie? Fine. I'm meeting 2 of my exes tonight. What would you do if I told you that? The words hit me like a slap, but I kept my voice steady. I'd probably want to meet them too. Before she could react, I pulled out my phone and opened FaceTime. My sister Karen's face appeared on the screen, looking confused but alert despite the late hour. Eddie, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Karen. Vanessa just wanted to share some exciting news with the family. I turned the phone toward my wife, who had gone pale beneath her perfectly applied makeup. Go ahead, honey. Tell Karen about your plans tonight. Eddie, what the hell are you doing? I'm calling your bluff. I tapped the screen to add my parents to the call. Mom, Dad, you're going to love this. Vanessa has something she wants to tell everyone. My mother's worried face appeared in the corner of the screen. What's happening? Is everything all right? Vanessa lunged for the phone, but I held it out of reach. Tell them about the 2 exes, Nessa. Tell them about the hotel meetings and the new lingerie. You son of a bitch. She grabbed for her purse, knocking over a lamp in the process. The crash echoed through our living room as my family watched in real-time horror. Language, dear, I said calmly. We're on a family call. My father's voice cut through the chaos. Edward, what in God's name is going on? I ended the call and set the phone down on the coffee table. Vanessa stood there, breathing hard, her perfect hair slightly mussed, her designer dress wrinkled from her failed grab at my phone. Tomorrow, I said quietly. The gloves come off. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her expression. Fear, maybe, or recognition that the man she'd been walking all over for the past year wasn't going to roll over and beg anymore. You have no idea what you just started, she whispered. I smiled. Actually, I think I do. She left without another word, the front door slamming behind her hard enough to rattle the windows. I walked to the kitchen, opened another beer, and started planning. The next morning, Vanessa was gone before I woke up. No surprise there, she'd been avoiding me for weeks, staying late at her marketing job and leaving early for client meetings. What she didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this moment longer than she realized. My best friend Mick showed up at 7 a.m. with coffee and donuts, just like old times when we worked construction together before he went military and I started my contracting business. Heard you had some family drama last night, he said, settling into one of our kitchen chairs. Karen called me at midnight, worried sick. Vanessa's been cheating. I said it matter-of-factly, like I was discussing the weather. Has been for months, maybe longer. Mick nodded slowly. He'd never liked Vanessa. Said she had the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. What's the plan? Legal revenge. Clean, thorough, and absolutely devastating. I showed him the folder I'd been building for weeks. Bank statements showing mysterious charges at expensive restaurants and hotels. Credit card bills for lingerie I'd never seen her wear at home. Screenshots of her location data, from our shared family plan showing her at places she'd never mentioned. This is all above board? Mick asked, flipping through the evidence. Everything. Shared accounts, family phone plan, joint credit cards, all legally accessible to me as her husband. I pulled out a small device from my toolbox. This is going in her car today. Dash cam for insurance purposes. She'll never think twice about it. We spent the morning installing the camera and setting up the tracking software. Vanessa's car was still in the driveway. She'd taken an Uber to whatever hotel she'd ended up at last night. Mrs. Felton appeared at her window across the street, binoculars in hand. I waved and she waved back enthusiastically. That woman had been better than a private investigator, keeping track of every strange car in our neighborhood. Eddie, she called from her front porch. That BMW was here again yesterday afternoon. Same one I told you about. Mick raised an eyebrow. Ballsy, coming to your house? Not anymore. I finished connecting the camera's wiring. After tonight, Greg Fenton is going to wish he'd kept his BMW in his own driveway. Greg Fenton? Sales manager at Hartwell Industries? You know him? Mick grinned, and it wasn't a nice expression. Deployed with his brother in Afghanistan. Family's got a reputation for thinking they're God's gift to women. Pretty boy, drives fancy cars, treats people like garbage. Perfect. Then you won't feel bad about what comes next. That evening, we followed Vanessa to the downtown Marriott. She met Greg in the lobby. Tall, artificially tanned, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. They disappeared into the elevator together, and I started my timer. 2 hours later, Greg emerged alone, looking satisfied and checking his phone. He walked to his BMW in the parking garage, whistling. I stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. Greg Fenton? He looked up, startled. Yeah? Who's asking? Eddie Halloran, Vanessa's husband. The color drained from his face, but he tried to play it cool. I don't know what you think you know, but... I held up my phone, showing him a photo I'd taken of him and Vanessa in the lobby. Save it. I know exactly what I know. Instead of the confrontation he was probably expecting, I walked calmly to his BMW and dragged my house key along the driver's side door. The sound of metal on paint echoed through the parking garage. What the hell? I reached into my pocket and pulled out a condom. Unused, but he didn't need to know that, and placed it carefully on his hood. Next time you want to play with someone's wife, I said conversationally, make sure her husband isn't a contractor who knows how to handle tools. Greg stood there speechless as I walked away. Behind me, I heard him frantically trying to start his car, the engine turning over with a slight grinding sound that suggested maybe a few screws had worked their way loose from his undercarriage. Mick was waiting in my truck, laughing so hard he could barely breathe. Did you see his face? One down, I said, pulling out of the parking garage. 2 to go. The next phase required precision. I spent Tuesday morning at the bank, the insurance company, and my lawyer's office. By noon, I'd frozen our joint accounts pending suspicious activity, changed the locks on our house, canceled Vanessa's credit cards, and removed her from my health and auto insurance policies. It's called asset protection, I explained to my lawyer, Tom Mitchell, who'd handled my business contracts for years. My wife is engaging in behavior that puts our joint finances at risk. This is all legal, Eddie, but it's going to cause problems. That's the point. Vanessa discovered the changes when she tried to buy lunch at her favorite downtown bistro. Her card was declined. Then she tried the backup card. Declined. By the time she got home at 3 p.m., she was furious. She brought reinforcements, her best friend Alyssa, and her coworker Riley, both of whom had been enabling her affair for months with their girls' night out alibis and... what happens in Vegas mentality. You can't lock me out of my own house, Vanessa screamed from the front porch. I opened the door calmly. It's not your house. It's my house. Check the deed. We're married. I have rights. You had rights. Then you decided to exercise your right to sleep with other men. I held up a manila folder. Would you like to see the evidence? Alyssa and Riley exchanged glances. They knew something was coming. I opened the folder and spread its contents across our dining room table. Photos of Vanessa and Greg at the hotel. Screenshots of text messages from her phone. Our family plan gave me access to billing details and usage logs. Restaurant receipts charged to our joint credit card for meals I'd never eaten. Holy shit, Riley whispered. Language, I said mildly. We're discussing my wife's adultery, not hosting a rap battle. Alyssa picked up one of the photos. Vanessa, you said you were working late on the Henderson account. I was. This is all the Henderson account that was completed 3 weeks ago. Riley was looking at a restaurant receipt dated from last week. The one where you said you had to work through dinner? I watched as Vanessa's support system crumbled in real time. Her friends weren't stupid. They'd been lied to just as much as I had, used as unwitting accomplices in her deception. You need to leave, I told Vanessa. All of you. I'm not going anywhere. Actually, you are. I pulled out my phone and showed her a legal document. Restraining order. Filed this morning based on your threatening behavior last night. You have 30 minutes to collect essential items, supervised by me, and then you need to find somewhere else to stay. That's when Greg showed up. He banged on the front door like he owned the place, shouting about harassment and legal action. I opened the door to find him red-faced and sweating, his BMW sporting a fresh coat of primer, where someone had tried to cover the scratches. You need to stop harassing Vanessa. I looked him up and down slowly. I'm sorry. Who are you again? You know damn well who I am. I know you're the man who's been sleeping with my wife in hotel rooms, charged to my credit card. I stepped closer to him. What I don't know is why you think that gives you the right to show up at my house making demands. He tried to push past me. Big mistake. I grabbed his wrist and twisted, spinning him around and pressing him against the garage door. It wasn't particularly violent, more like a dance move that ended with his face against the metal and his arm bent at an uncomfortable angle. Next time you park in my driveway, I said quietly, I'll have your car towed into the river. You're assaulting me. Vanessa, call the police. I looked over my shoulder. Vanessa had her phone out, trying to record the scene. Go ahead. Record away. Make sure you get the part where Greg just admitted to sleeping with you. She lowered the phone quickly. I released Greg, and he stumbled away from the garage door, his face flushed with humiliation. This isn't over. Actually, it is. I held up my own phone. I've been recording this whole conversation, including the part where you just confessed to adultery in front of witnesses. He ran, literally ran to his car and drove away, tires squealing. Vanessa stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. You've changed. No, I said. I've just stopped pretending. I don't know who you really are. After they left, I sat in my kitchen and composed an email. Anonymous, untraceable, sent from a public computer at the library. Vanessa's boss at the marketing firm received a detailed breakdown of her inappropriate conduct, complete with evidence of personal calls and texts made on company time and company equipment. Let's see her talk her way out of this one. The annual Riverside Street Fair happened every October, transforming our sleepy downtown into a carnival of local vendors, craft beer, and small-town gossip. It was the perfect venue for the next phase of my plan. I'd spent the week strategically spreading information. Not lies. I didn't need lies when the truth was so much more damaging. A word here, a photo there, shared with the right people who had the right connections to the local rumor mill. Mrs. Felton had been particularly helpful, sharing her concerns about the strange cars in our neighborhood with her bridge club. The ladies at the Glass Tap had been very interested in my story about finding strange receipts in my wife's purse. By Friday, half the town knew that Vanessa Halloran was stepping out on her husband. Saturday afternoon, the fair was in full swing. I walked through the crowds with Mick, ostensibly enjoying the festivities, but really watching for my targets. Vanessa arrived around 2 p.m., dressed down in jeans and a sweater, probably trying to blend in and avoid attention. She'd been staying at Alyssa's place since I'd locked her out, but their friendship had been strained since the revelation about her lies. Greg was harder to spot at first. He'd traded his usual expensive suits for khakis and a polo shirt, but his BMW was parked prominently near the main entrance where everyone could see the fresh paint job. They met near the craft beer tent, trying to look casual. What they didn't expect was the reception waiting for them. "Well, well," called out Jimmy Morrison from behind the Rotary Club's burger stand. "If it isn't our local home wrecker?" Vanessa's face went white. Jimmy's wife had been in Mrs. Felton's bridge club. "Heard you've been keeping busy, Vanessa," added Sarah Chen from the PTA booth. "Real busy." More voices joined in. Not cruel exactly, but pointed. The kind of small-town judgment that cuts deeper than any insult. Greg tried to defend her. "Hey, that's enough. You people don't know what you're talking about." "We know plenty," said Bill Kowalski, one of my regular customers. "We know you've been parking that fancy car in Eddie Halloran's driveway while he's at work." "We know about the hotel receipts," added someone else. Greg's face was getting redder by the minute.
He just gave me a massage. That's it!
Remember, I won't be a cuckold!
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
He grabbed Vanessa's arm, trying to pull her away from the growing crowd of onlookers. That's when he made his second big mistake of the week. He slipped. Someone had spilled beer near the craft tent, and Greg's expensive leather shoes found the wet pavement at exactly the wrong moment. His feet went out from under him, and he went down hard, landing in a puddle of mud and spilled drinks. The crowd erupted in laughter. I watched from across the fairway as Greg scrambled to his feet, his polo shirt stained brown and his dignity in tatters. Vanessa tried to help him up, but she was laughing too. Nervous, embarrassed laughter that made everything worse. "Looks like karma's got good timing," Mick observed. Greg spotted me in the crowd and started pushing through people, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. "This is your fault. You set this up." I held up my hands innocently. "I'm just here for the funnel cake." He swung at me. Clumsy, telegraphed, the kind of punch that comes from anger instead of training. I sidestepped easily, and his momentum carried him into the dunking booth, where he landed with a splash that sent water cascading over the nearby crowd. The laughter was deafening now. People were pulling out phones, recording Greg's public meltdown for posterity. I leaned down to where he was sitting waist-deep in the dunking booth tank. "Leave town, Greg. Tonight. Because tomorrow, I start sharing the photos of you with Jennifer Martinez from accounting." His eyes went wide. "How did you—" "I'm a contractor. I know people who know people. Jennifer's husband is a welder. Big guy. Short temper." I smiled pleasantly. "Your choice." He climbed out of the tank without another word, water streaming from his clothes, and walked away through the crowd of laughing onlookers. Vanessa tried to follow him, but Alyssa grabbed her arm. "Don't! You've embarrassed yourself enough for one day. This is all Eddie's fault." "No," Alyssa said firmly. "This is your fault, all of it." Mrs. Felton, bless her heart, had been live streaming the entire scene on her Facebook page. By evening, the video had been shared hundreds of times in local community groups. Vanessa's humiliation had gone viral, at least within the borders of our small town. One more phase to go. Sunday morning brought the final act. I'd spent Saturday night preparing, and by dawn, everything was in place. Vanessa's clothes were neatly folded and stacked on our front lawn, along with her personal belongings, makeup, and the expensive shoes she loved so much. Not thrown or scattered. I wasn't a barbarian, just relocated to a place where the whole neighborhood could see them. I'd also printed out enlarged copies of some of her more interesting text message screenshots and taped them to the boxes. Nothing explicit, just enough to make it clear what kind of person she really was. The neighbors started gathering around 8 a.m. Mrs. Felton was first, of course, followed by the Johnsons from next door and the Martinez family from across the street. Word spread quickly in our subdivision. Vanessa arrived at 9 driving Alyssa's car since I'd had her BMW repossessed. It was in my name, after all, purchased with money from my business account. She got out of the car and stared at the display on our lawn. Her face cycled through emotions: shock, rage, humiliation, and finally something that might have been despair. "You bastard," she said quietly. "Careful," I replied from my position on the front porch. The neighbors are watching. She started grabbing clothes and shoving them into garbage bags, her movements frantic and desperate. The crowd of onlookers grew larger. Need some help there, Vanessa? Called out Mrs. Felton with false sweetness. Go to hell. Language, dear, there are children present. Mick pulled up in his truck just as Vanessa was loading the last of her belongings. He had his phone out, recording everything for what he called documentation purposes. This is harassment, Vanessa screamed at him. This is consequences, I corrected. There's a difference. She tried to get back into the house one last time, but the new locks held firm. In frustration, she picked up one of her designer shoes and threw it at me. I ducked, and the shoe sailed over my head to land in the rose bushes. Vanessa, off balance from the throw, stumbled backward and fell into the same bushes. The crowd's laughter was immediate and merciless. As she struggled to extract herself from the thorns, my phone rang. It was Tom Mitchell, my lawyer. Eddie, I just got off the phone with Vanessa's attorney. She's trying to claim domestic abuse. Is she now? I put the phone on speaker so everyone could hear. That's interesting, considering I have video evidence of her attacking me with a shoe while I was standing peacefully on my own property. Vanessa's face went pale. She'd forgotten about Mick's camera. Also, Tom continued, her attempt at filing a restraining order against you has been denied. Apparently, the judge reviewed the evidence you provided and determined that she was the aggressor in this situation. What evidence? Vanessa demanded. I held up my phone. The video you took of me restraining Greg. You edited it to make it look like I attacked him unprovoked. Unfortunately for you, I have the original unedited footage showing him threatening me and trying to force his way into my house. Her lawyer had tried to use her edited video as evidence of my violent behavior. Instead, it had backfired spectacularly, proving that she was willing to fabricate evidence and commit perjury. Oh, and Vanessa, Tom's voice carried clearly across the lawn. Your employer has terminated your employment for gross misconduct, something about inappropriate use of company resources and falsifying timesheets. She stared at me in horror. You destroyed my career. You destroyed your career. I just documented it. The crowd began to disperse as Vanessa finished loading her belongings into Alyssa's car. But before she could leave, one final surprise arrived. Greg's BMW pulled up to the curb, but it wasn't Greg driving. It was a woman I didn't recognize. Blonde, angry, and clearly looking for answers. Are you Vanessa Halloran? The woman demanded. Who's asking? I'm Jennifer Martinez, Greg Fenton's fiancée. She held up her phone, showing photos that looked remarkably similar to the ones I had of Greg and Vanessa. We need to talk. I decided that was my cue to go inside. Through the window, I watched as Jennifer confronted Vanessa about her relationship with Greg, while Alyssa tried unsuccessfully to mediate and the remaining neighbors pretended not to eavesdrop. The conversation lasted 20 minutes and ended with Jennifer slapping Vanessa across the face before driving away in Greg's BMW. Apparently, Greg had tried to salvage his relationship by claiming that Vanessa had seduced him. Jennifer, being smarter than he gave her credit for, had done her own investigation and discovered the truth about his pattern of cheating. As Alyssa's car finally pulled away from my curb, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Vanessa was unemployed, homeless, friendless, and facing potential legal charges for perjury and evidence tampering. Greg had lost his fiancée, his reputation, and according to Mick's contacts, his job at Hartwell Industries. But I wasn't quite finished yet. The Glass Tap had been my regular hangout for 15 years, back when Vanessa and I were happy and life was simpler. It seemed fitting that it would be the venue for the final chapter of this story. I'd arranged a small party for that Tuesday night. Nothing fancy, just drinks with friends and neighbors who'd supported me through the divorce proceedings. Word had gotten around, as word does in small towns, and by 8 p.m. the place was packed. Mrs. Felton was there, regaling anyone who'd listened with her blow-by-blow account of Sunday's lawn display. Bill Kowalski and his crew from the construction site had claimed a corner table and were buying rounds for anyone with a good Vanessa story. Even Jennifer Martinez had shown up, apparently having bonded with several of the other women over their shared experience with Greg Fenton's wandering eye. The atmosphere was festive, celebratory even. I was holding court at the bar, accepting congratulations and fielding questions about my plans for the future. That's when Greg walked in. The conversations died one by one, as people noticed him standing in the doorway. He looked terrible, unshaven, wearing wrinkled clothes. his usual arrogance replaced by something that looked like desperation. "Eddie," he called across the bar, "we need to talk. I think we've said everything that needs saying." He pushed through the crowd toward me. "Please, I'm begging you. I lost my job, my girlfriend, everything. Can't we just call it even?" I set down my beer and looked at him thoughtfully. "Even? You think we're even? I made a mistake. I'm sorry, but you've ruined my life." "I didn't ruin anything. I just made sure everyone knew who you really are." I gestured to the crowd. "Tell them, Greg. Tell everyone here about the other women." His face went white. "What other women? Jennifer wasn't your first victim, was she? What about Susan from the marketing department at your old job? Or Rebecca from the gym? Should I keep going?" The crowd was listening intently now. Jennifer Martinez had moved closer, her face hard with anger. "You told me Vanessa was the only one," she said quietly. Greg's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Jen, I can explain." "Explain what? That you're a serial cheater who destroys marriages for fun?" I pulled out my phone and opened a folder of screenshots. "Ladies and gentlemen, let me share some of Greg's greatest hits. Text messages to 7 different women over the past 2 years, all while he was engaged to Jennifer." I started reading them aloud. Nothing obscene, just enough to make it clear that Greg Fenton was a predator who specialized in targeting married women and women in relationships. "Stop," he pleaded. "Please, just stop." "Why? You didn't stop when you were destroying my marriage. You didn't stop when you were lying to Jennifer. Why should I stop now?" He lunged at me then, probably hoping to grab my phone or maybe just lash out in frustration. But Greg Fenton was a sales manager who spent his time in offices and gyms, not construction sites and real-world confrontations. I sidestepped his clumsy attack, and his momentum carried him straight into the old jukebox in the corner. The impact was spectacular. Lights flashing, music skipping, and Greg bouncing off the machine to land in a heap on the floor. The entire bar erupted in laughter and applause. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, "Greg Fenton has left the building." He scrambled to his feet and ran for the door, pushing through the crowd of people who were now openly mocking him. Through the window, I watched him stumble to his car. Not the BMW anymore, but some beat-up sedan that had seen better days. As his taillights disappeared down the street, the jukebox flickered back to life and started playing "Hit the Road, Jack." I hadn't even paid for that song. The party continued until well past midnight, but the real climax came around 11 when Vanessa made her final appearance. She burst through the door like an avenging angel, her hair wild and her eyes blazing with fury. The crowd parted as she marched straight toward me. "You son of a bitch!" she screamed. "You destroyed everything!" She tried to slap me, but I caught her wrist easily. "Careful, Nessa. We have witnesses." "I don't care. You ruined my life. You turned everyone against me." I leaned in close enough that only she could hear me. "No, you want to know the truth? I didn't turn anyone against you. I just stopped covering for you. All those times you were working late or out with friends, I made excuses for you. I protected your reputation when people asked questions. I defended you when Mrs. Felton mentioned strange cars in our driveway." Her face was inches from mine, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You did this to yourself, Vanessa. Every choice, every lie, every betrayal, I just made sure there were consequences." I released her wrist and stepped back. "You wanted excitement? You wanted adventure? Welcome to it. Your next adventure will be figuring out how to survive without someone else paying your bills." She looked around the bar at the faces watching her. Neighbors, former friends, people who had once respected her. Now they saw her for what she really was. A selfish, manipulative woman who had destroyed her own life through greed and arrogance. "This isn't over," she whispered. "Actually, it is." I raised my beer in a mock toast. "Here's to new beginnings, Nessa. May you get exactly what you deserve." She stood there for another moment, perhaps waiting for someone to defend her or offer sympathy. But the silence stretched on, broken only by the sound of the jukebox and the quiet conversations of people who had moved on from her drama. Finally, she turned and walked out of the glass tap for the last time. I watched through the window as she got into a taxi. Apparently, even Alyssa had finally abandoned her. As the car pulled away, I felt a sense of completion that I hadn't experienced in months. Mick appeared at my elbow with a fresh beer. So what now? I looked around the bar at the friends and neighbors who had stood by me through this mess. Mrs. Felton was showing photos to Jennifer Martinez. Bill Kowalski was telling war stories to anyone who'd listen. The jukebox was playing classic rock, and for the first time in a year, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. And now? I smiled and raised my glass. Now, I get on with my life. The crowd cheered, and we drank until the bar closed. When I finally made it home to my empty house, I found a note that had been slipped under my door. It was from Vanessa's lawyer, informing me that she was dropping all legal action and agreeing to an uncontested divorce. She would make no claim on my assets, my business, or my property. I crumpled up the note and tossed it in the trash. Then I opened a beer, sat on my front porch, and watched the sun come up over a neighborhood where everyone knew exactly who I was and what I stood for. If you're reading this, Nessa, I hope you learned something from all this. Actions have consequences. Lies have expiration dates. And some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. But mostly, I hope you learned that the quiet guy you thought you could walk all over had more fight in him than you ever imagined. Cheers to that.